our conversation on collaboration in the housing counseling community. Very glad that you're on. This has turned out to be a very popular conversation. We had expected this to be a relatively discrete group of people, and people all across the United States have been very interested, and we're getting quite a turnout. And so very glad you're part of it. I think it's important. Let me just quickly define sort of what I think we're trying to accomplish, and we're pretty open to some ideas that if we want to expand or think about it in broader and different ways. As we know, the housing counseling community has been an organizational mission program that has done excellent things, but has continually been under stress around funding and around resource and program challenges. And despite the great work we do and the widely recognized group, at least among some of the policymakers. And the idea here is that we can no longer depend on federal funding sources, and we need to really figure out how to be able to tap into opportunities. And I think originally we're thinking just statewide, but in conversations with you all, it seems to be local and statewide, and that if we can figure out how to collaborate more effectively, work in unison, and have more common voice projects, that we may be able to address programmatic and funding opportunities as a community on the local level and on the state level, and tap into new programs and opportunities. So that's the whole concept here. We are very interested in what your thoughts are about how to make this into a useful conversation and how to proceed. Today what we're going to do is talk with one of the most successful collaborations, and that's the groups in New York State, who are doing lots of very good and innovative things, and I think we're all very excited about them. They're certainly not the only players in town. There's other states doing excellent work as well, and we'd be interested in tapping into their good work as well. But we're also very interested in trying to figure out what would be most useful to groups in the field. And keep in mind that we have a spectrum of opportunities. So there's some locations where there's no real functioning collaboration except on the most ad hoc basis, and there's places where there's very sophisticated organizations that are pulling together and doing lots of coordinated work, and then there are places where they've raised the money to staff full-blown operations with programmatic opportunities. And so that all fits in together. We should figure out how to support each of those and help any of them grow to maximize their opportunity. We're going to start with the New York groups, and really appreciate we've got a great team of people who've come together, done some, they're doing great work, but they've also done some thinking about how to present about this and to maybe think about how it might be most useful to you out in the field. And we have Jennifer Murphy from HomeSmart New York. Jennifer's had many roles in our housing counseling world, and was involved in the very beginning of National Housing Resource Center. She's the executive director of HomeSmart New York now. Hillary Lamashaw is with Troy Rehabilitation and Improvement Program, and Hillary's been deeply involved in HomeSmart and has had a long history of helping guide its development. We have Christy Peel from the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods has been a vital, innovative force in our housing counseling world and on the foreclosure field and beyond, and has a big role in what's going on in New York. And Empire Justice Center, Ellie Pepper from Empire Justice Center will be is joining us as well. And many of you know Ellie from some of the contributions she's done on the Leaders Call, but Empire Justice Center and Center for New York City Neighborhoods do joint projects together that help support counseling and are both vital organizations. So that's our team today. What we're going to do is start off with kind of an overview on and background on the HomeSmart in New York and collaboration that is being done. Jennifer, are you with us, and do you want to kick it off?
I am here and I am ready.
Let's get going.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I start the presentation by putting up a map of New York for a specific reason, because I'm constantly reminded about the size of the state. I often tell people that it's the size of a small country, and its diversity. It is truly a state that encompasses great diversity. It's got one of the biggest cities in the world. It's got many other urban areas, some more successful, economically successful than others, and it's got great pockets that are rural, as well as having a lot of suburbs around our cities. So we really are kind of a little microcosm, and some of our challenges certainly come from that, but I think some of our power also comes from the fact that we are able to represent such a great group of people. So you can go to the next slide. The collaborative partners on here today, Bruce already introduced you, but I made this cool slide, and I thought our logos kind of really came out cool together. We are the three organizations that are on together, and we really do spend a lot of time working together, strategizing together, and thinking of ways that we can partner together, not just our three organizations, but we have many member organizations. HomeSmart New York is a membership organization. We have 77 member organizations under us, including Empire Justice Center and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. So we are partners and members together. Go to the next one. Besides forming partnerships with housing counseling agencies, which we are primarily a housing counseling agency collaborative, we work very closely with legal service providers and advocacy organizations in the nonprofit world. We also work with to build partnerships with lenders, servicers, realtors, and our state and local government, and are open to pretty much exploring partnerships with just about anyone that has to do with the world of housing and home ownership. Go on to the next one. So that's a little overview of the organization. I'm going to turn this over to Hillary Lameshaw now, and let Hillary, who has been there consistently from beginning to today, discuss the background of the organization for you.
Great. Hi, thanks, and thanks to Bruce for organizing this call. And well, we're really proud of HomeSmart New York. We know that we have lots of other stuff to learn, so we look forward to hearing from those of you around the country as well, and sharing best practices and the challenges. And that's sort of the point of a statewide coalition, of course. So HomeSmart New York started getting together in the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006, really focused on pre-purchase counseling, and then we're able to benefit, I think, from the foreclosure crisis in '08 that brought some money to the table, and sort of, had really brought housing counseling to the front as well. We organize, though, we are a legal entity, a not-for-profit corporation with 501c3 recognition from the IRS, and in creating our corporate papers, it's clear that we came together for the public benefit. That's the only way you get 501c3 status. So the benefit of HomeSmart New York is to bring access to high-quality professional housing counseling services to consumers across the state, regardless of location. And so it would be consistent, quality housing counseling. And so that's our purpose, and the way we do that is through bringing housing counseling agencies and other partners together regularly to share information. We do this in a couple of ways. We have both a statewide board, and we also have local chapters. The local chapters are really key because, as Jennifer mentioned, there's a lot of diversity among the states, so we're split up into 7 chapters. that meet at least quarterly, if not monthly, and exchange information. So it's both the information they're getting from the statewide coalition, which is a lot of the regulations, policies, tools, complex information that came out of the feds or the state over the years. One of the benefits that we were able to do is sort of distill it and provide it to housing counselors who are always really busy, as you know, in ways that was easily obtainable, accessible, and digestible by them. So it was a real benefit to housing counseling agencies. So I think they saw right out of the box how important it is to have a coalition that's able to share this information with you. And then at the chapter level, the information was also focused on what was happening locally, what were the trends they were seeing, who were the servicers they were working with or finding useful, who were some of the partners they had on the ground, and what were some potential funding sources. And I think that was really key for housing counseling agencies, some of them who shared service area, might have been competitors. They really understood the value proposition that the coalition was able to bring, and that working together really overcame any kind of past senses of competition that they might have. That there was more that, as in bringing to scale the knowledge about the importance of housing counseling, the benefits of it, the challenges that we're facing, and building partnerships and trying to find funding, that bringing that to scale is more important than individual agencies, having any kind of turf battle. So it really is very helpful to have the chapters. One of the things we've learned is that because chapters have been organized by volunteers, and that is housing counselors in a particular region who say, oh yeah, we'll step up and be the leader of this chapter. And we know that's tough. We know everybody's busy. So to the extent that we can, the statewide coalition tries to support the chapters, helping arrange meetings, sometimes finding funding, and also helping them access training that enables them to get NCHEC credits. So that's the other sort of value that we were able to bring to not-for-profit, to some of the educational credits that counselors need, and to do it in easy ways. And we'll talk more about that later in the training session. So it was about core leaders stepping up to get this going in the first place. We did benefit by having NABEWorks America with a strong interest from our regional office in trying to move the issue, and so it was helpful to have some staff there to be able to help convene calls initially. But since then, it's really been volunteers. Until recently, we were able to get enough funding, again, to bring on Jennifer as an executive director part-time. We've had some funding over the years to be able to bring on consultants. Doug Dillon and Marcia Nedland and some others have been really helpful in helping make the case for housing counseling and working on marketing issues as well. We do an annual conference, another really high value for our members across the state. And one of the sort of important services or important voices we're able to bring is that of advocacy. So when you get housing counseling agencies together, we have an important story to tell, both that of the consumers and what they've been going through, and also the value of housing counseling, the need for funding, the need for public policies to support. One of the important things, I think, in making these kind of things work is to support and trust each other, to have people who will step up to the plate, because a lot of it has been on a volunteer basis, and that's been tough. The other important thing is really communication. And again, it was communication from federal policies that were being translated. It was also information from the chapters that were coming up to the statewide coalition, so we were well aware of what the trends were on the ground, what the issues were that consumers were facing, as well as the challenges that housing counseling agencies were facing. So we're able to put that into the advocacy campaign, fundraising, and other kind of efforts. So I think we'll talk about advocacy next.
Great. So Christy, are you with us? So, and if we don't have Christy, then Lucy, can you step in? Lucy, I think you've got yourself muted. There you go.
We're here. Sorry, that was Christy's technical problem. I thought I was muted by you guys. Hi. I'm Christy Hill. I'm the ED at the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. I'm here with Lucy Rames, who's done a lot of work with our network here in New York City and a huge number of partners across the state, and also is a board member of HomeSmart New York. So one of the things that you'll hear about, and I guess we could go to the next slide. One of the things you'll hear about throughout the conversation, and just should pause by saying thank you to Bruce and Matthew for having us all today. It's a great venue to talk about our work together. And thanks to Jennifer for organizing. So one of the things you'll hear is how intertwined a lot of our sort of local and statewide efforts are, which is part of the way that we've developed a stronger coalition, right? So there are a lot of connections that our housing counseling groups make with each other within New York City, legal services groups make within the community of legal services groups within New York City, and then those bonds cross each other locally and then across the state as well in terms of creating this larger network. So it's interdisciplinary, and then it's also not only regional but across the whole state. And one of the ways that HomeSmart, especially in its first, when it was under its first name, the Coalition for Excellence in Homeownership Education, came together with some real power was in 2010 and 2011 when we were fighting for the continuation of statewide funding with our state government. And this was funding that had come through two really short-term funding pots. One was the Recovery Act, and before that, the Housing Trust Fund at the state level had funding for housing counseling and legal services. So when that funding ran out, the coalition, HomeSmart New York, started to do a lot of, phone calls about how to get a real advocacy campaign going with elected officials and with the state government to continue funding. And it was a great process. We used the typical methodologies that everybody uses in terms of, listservs and phone calls and coordinating messaging and collaborating on materials. And it really allowed us to create this larger community of folks advocating for funding. That coalition was successful in getting some funding into the budget. Unfortunately, our governor ended up vetoing the nominal amount we got into the budget, but luckily, because of the very strong case that we had made for it, when national mortgage settlement funding came into the state through the Attorney General's office, there was a really strong argument and narrative and structure in place for distributing 5 years of funding totaling $100 million across the state. And that funding, building on top of the other 2 rounds of funding that I mentioned, has just been instrumental in creating, additional strength and capacity and expertise across the state's housing counseling and legal services. And it's allowed us to also partner with other coalitions. So folks on HomeSmart New York are always connecting us to the Rural Preservation Coalition, which is a group of folks that operate in that do housing issues across the rural parts of the state, as well as, excuse me, the neighborhood preservation corporations, who also serve a very specific role around housing services in some of the more urban parts of the state. So it's a really neat network to connect to other networks as well. And part of what we've done is the advocacy work is to really develop stories and approaches. I mean, again, this is stuff that everybody does, but it allows us to kind of have one outlet for that. I talked a little bit about the funding that we've already done across the state. We're about to get geared up for another round of funding advocacy as, the National Mortgage Settlement funding that was distributed through the AG's office is starting to tail off. So it's great that we've maintained this infrastructure over the years, primarily through Home Smart New York and some other coalitions. The other way that we work together is through a group called New Yorkers for Responsible Lending, which I think predated the Coalition for Excellence in Homeowner Education, but also focuses on some really specific advocacy issues around lending that extends beyond housing, but there's a lot of really good overlap there as well. And one of the things that we want to work towards to be able to do better is demonstrating the collective impact of our work. So being able to really aggregate, not just in terms of numbers, but the success that we've had in stabilizing homeowners and the capacity that we have to provide more holistic services for homeowners and communities going forward in the future. And to really, establish Home Smart New York as not only a statewide coalition, but having a really good local impact as well. So I'll stop there.
So, Lucy, do you have anything to add to that, or are we?
Sure, I will just add that I think it's really the result of all these different efforts that we have, across New York City, across New York State, to really work collaboratively in a variety of different ways. And we're ultimately all working towards the same goal. And it's through our collaborations and through our joint efforts that we're really able to, like Christy said, really able to kind of capture our impact collectively and really make the argument for, what we're doing and why we're important. And I think that's what's so hard, and that's what's often, missing in this discussion about housing counseling. We know that the work that we do has impact, but being able to say it broadly and widely is really difficult, and to try, so the more we can work together and the more we can kind of speak with one voice, the more we can actually be heard. And so I think that's where our strength lies, is that we have a number of different ways that we work together. And that we collaborate. And collaboration is kind of the key to how we have been able to be successful and how we have been able to not only have impact, but also innovate and, create new solutions and, highlight issues. So, so I think that's where our future, our past has been, but also where our future lies.
And so you've because you have this collaborative framework, you've been able to work in the legislature and with the state AG's office. Are there other places where this is played out?
Well, we've also worked directly with the governor's office around legislation and developing new programs, some of which are administered through the state housing Department of Housing and Community Renewal, and also Sunny Mae, the State of New York Mortgage Agency. So it's not just with the legislature, but it's a lot of programmatic collaboration on the agency level as well.
And then on the more local level, I think we've been able to, have some success in getting local support from local government or from private funders and foundations to really who really understand the collective impact that we can have and that we have had. So we've been able to kind of leverage the support from government to be able to really increase the amount of funding and support for this valuable work, and also be able at the local level to look at what kind of other solutions we need to be working on. So not just funding, but what kind of policy solutions or new programs need to be created to address more local needs. So we've been working on those as well. And I think that that's just a part of kind of what we're all working on all the time, and trying to share all of our experience in this, so that through collaboration we can kind of we can learn from each other and be more effective.
Great. So let's move on to marketing. So Jennifer?
Yes. Hi. So one of the key places that we're able to centralize our message is through marketing housing counseling. And by marketing, I mean not just promoting housing counseling and getting the word out that housing counseling exists and what it does to prospective clients, funders, partners, and really one of the things that I've experienced throughout my career is what is a housing counselor. If you're at a cocktail party and somebody says, "What do you do?" and you say you're a housing counselor, chances are that they're going to look at you like, "What's that?" Right? So right now we're running a social media campaign called Ask a Housing Counselor. Follow us, please, on Twitter and like us on Facebook, because one of the ways that our message will get out fastest in those medias is by having a lot of followers. And they're probably silently laughing at me on mute now because I'm walking around asking people to like me all the time. So Home Smart New York, we're on Facebook, and feel free to share our campaign. Also promoting online and home buyer education. One of the things that we've done as a network is we've joined eHome America, and we're a centralized online spot that you can go to. We have our own designated web page that you can go to. If you want to take an online class, you can go through us to eHome America, but be connected to one of our member organizations that's local to you. eHome America does require at least one individual counseling session. We are working with NYSAR, the New York State Association of Realtors, to cross-market. They believe housing counseling is a crucial part of the home buying process. So they're going to help us by putting out the word out there that if you can find a housing counselor through Home Smart New York. We're going to also do regional homeownership events together, where we're going to come together as partners under the Home Smart New York umbrella and split up the territory and the clients, so that way we have a shared workload, and instead of each of us putting on individual events, which, as everyone knows, is a lot of work, we feel it's better to put on one large event than split the workload. We also provide an online search where you could go and find a Home Smart New York agency serving your area. They said some part of our areas are pretty rural, so we're also working on technology with our members, so that we're going to be able to offer counseling via Skype, more phone counseling, helping to reach the rural areas and kind of taking on those counseling deserts. But our ultimate goal is that as many people as possibly can, I'd like to say everyone, but as many people as possibly can understand what a housing counselor does and makes housing counseling as much a part of the home buying process. I often compare it that 20 years ago when I first started in this business, nobody got home inspections. Everybody just bought their house as is. Now it's almost unheard of for people not to get home inspections. Everybody knows what a home inspector is. My goal is that housing counseling become a part of the process too, and that everybody know what housing counseling is. And I think I see as one of our greatest charges is to get that word out there to homeowners.
Which is very valuable. So do you want to quickly explain the symbol you've got and what the purpose is?
The symbol?
Your
Yeah, our logo.
Oh, my
Homer.
owl.
Your logo.
Homer.
Yes.
Homer, is that what the name is?
His name is Homer, yes. Homer is my homie. He represents a wise animal, right? So as he is my good housekeeping seal of approval also. We have if you are a member of Home Smart New York, there is a little Homer logo that says Home Smart New York member that you can put on all of your literature, your website, your business cards, your letterhead. As we go through the presentation, you'll hear the services that we provide, but our goal is that we have a very strong, professional, well-educated network of service providers throughout the state, and so that you are receiving the same continuity of service that if you walk into a housing counseling agency in, Buffalo or Rochester or Brooklyn, you're going to receive the same high-level, well-educated professional counseling, and that Homer will be how you will know that you are at a Home Smart New York agency.
It's very smart. I mean, this whole question about trust is a huge issue, and both the whole concentration on really marketing housing counseling to the New York consumers and to communicate that safety issue. Very good stuff. Okay, so let's move on to fundraising. So Hillary, do you want to take the lead on that?
Sure. And I do want to just sort of put a PS to the marketing piece.
Yep.
So a lot of the way our work has gotten done is through a committee structure at the statewide level. So there was a marketing committee that, had members from all across the state and worked really closely with our consultant, Marcia Nedlund, over the course of a couple of years, and Doug Dilla before that, and paid a lot of attention to sort of the messaging. And the messaging and the target markets and the different messaging to the different target markets, and so and the logo and what the picture is. So it's something that's really obviously important because, and you probably have all talked about this, the term housing counseling by itself might be a negative. Counseling means that there's a deficiency in someone. So we're not going to promote housing counseling per se in the name of an organization, but Home Smart is something obviously that people can say, yeah, I want to be smart about my home. The owl, there was a lot of discussion and pushback on the owl for a while. So it really involved, and I think while it was a bit of a painful process because it took a long time for us to come up with I think the logo and the name, is what was important is that it, all the member groups got to vote on it, got to discuss it in the chapter meetings, got to send in, got to determine, there was 5 names each chapter could vote on, and they had to, take a secret vote and send in their name. So I think that was a useful, in terms of organizational development and having members feel more connected to a statewide coalition, I think that was really helpful. And that's often the challenge because the member organizations are so rooted in the daily grind of, the work that you do, the counseling, blah, 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 that sometimes it's hard to pay attention to this kind of stuff, and certainly hard to think about how do I participate in a statewide coalition, never mind a local chapter. So those were some strategies that I think offered a little bit of fun to some of our members. So fundraising is, of course, key to the world that we're in, and in fact was one of the motivating forces in terms of having us come together as a statewide coalition in the first place, was really thinking about the sustainability of housing counseling agencies. And so looking at ways to raise money for the agencies as well as the statewide coalition was really key. And it was really important to us that our member organizations didn't feel threatened by a statewide coalition by thinking that any funder that we talk to might pull their money away from their local group on the ground and instead put it into the sort of larger, more efficient, animal. So that's a dance that we continue to do and be really clear about, the sources, whether we're looking at, local money that goes to the local, working with the local groups to get money into them. So that was really an important part, so that there weren't any feelings of competition for funding between the agencies and the statewide coalition, but only a sense that we're all in this together, and we want all of us to keep on going. So there are different ways that we're, of course, looking at fundraising. So some of it is increasing access to shared funding. So, there are potentially some places where the bigger is better, even while they continue making grants on the ground. And so we are looking at that kind of thing, or funding where groups, a couple of agencies could get funded together and divide the services into their niche services and do some collaboration on the ground that way. We're looking at what we call developing new sources of funding, is really decreasing our costs of doing business so that we're all able to be more efficient. So part of the collaboration we do on either programs and events, or on sharing information, on providing templates to other organizations. So a lot of the networking stuff that we do, how do you do your business, how, what ideas can I steal so that I can, make my agency more efficient and more effective and don't have to recreate the wheel. We are looking to develop fee-for-services, and clearly that's an important piece of it. The services that we do, much of the counseling we do is never paid for, and those, some that is not nearly covered completely. And I think as there's a growing recognition of the need for housing counseling, we always need to figure out how it's going to get paid for and build that into any new programs that come along. So Jennifer did mention the partnership we have with eHome America. I mean, one of the ways to increase efficiency and effectiveness is through online counseling. We are, some of our groups are more ahead of the curve on that, some are less. Some don't like to do it at all because we really believe in the personal touch, the whole cradle to grave, trusting relationship between housing counselor and consumer. And so as we talk about online counseling, members of HomeSmart New York do require that there be an individual counseling session at the end of any online education before certificate would be handed out. And we think that's a measure of the quality of the service that we provide, to have that one-on-one. And it can be by phone, and we're trying to work on how to make that more efficient for some of the groups as well. But we think that's really important, as I say, to make sure that the consumer is well educated, but also if there's any trouble down the line, the consumer has this trusting relationship with the counselor. So eHome America has partnered with us on the pre-purchase side, the homebuyer education, and so there's a three-way split of fees for the $99 eHome cost to the consumer. So the counseling agency, so for consumers who come through eHome America and HomeSmart New York, and then can find the counseling agency that's closest to them. So for those who come through the statewide sort of portal, there is a shared fee for HomeSmart New York, and that's $24, eHome $25, and the counseling agency $50. Counseling agencies that are independently or already members of eHome America, and consumers find them directly and don't go through HomeSmart New York, don't split the fee with HomeSmart New York. So the point is that HomeSmart New York can help market online education to a much larger audience much easier, and so where more consumers are brought in through that way, there's a fee sharing, but not if it's a local sort of recruit. We are also,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just quickly, so this is one of the questions that had come in, and I think you did address a lot of the question, but is the idea of the HomeSmart New York as kind of a statewide eHome America partner, is that something that you envision could be replicable in other states, or is it, and it seems like it kind of presumes there being a statewide collaborative, but is that something that you could see happening in other states?
That other statewide coalition with eHome America? Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
And there's also the potential, of course, to partner with other online education providers. Certainly, as we look at, and we're not sure that we're going to go that way because eHome America is the one we've been working with for a while, and we value that relationship. We also want to make sure, of course, that any kind of product or program that we endorse meets quality standards that we set. So we would want to look at all the programs. We are moving ahead and piloting with eHome America a post-purchase online course. which is exciting, and we're really excited to be asked to pilot it with them. It would provide a homeowner's insurance discount to homeowners. Right now, there's one insurance company that's lined up and agreed to do that, and eHome America is reaching out to other insurance companies to try to get that kind of agreement as well. So we think there's a lot of opportunity in that kind of partnership stuff. And we do think that, online education, for better or worse, and certainly better in remote areas where people can't get in to see someone. So we think it's really a great opportunity for consumers, of course, as well as the groups. And we're looking for new and creative ways to bring in money. I think that a couple of strategies that are really important to that is to have as broad a coalition and collaborating partners as possible. And I also think that it's important to think about housing counseling not as a thing unto itself, but that it's really a bigger issue. It's really a consumer issue. It's really an educated consumer. It's really an equity issue, so that people are given good information to be able to make smart decisions, to build wealth, and try to break down some of the obstacles that we face in this country around inequities. And so it's a piece of a larger problem and issue, and I think to that extent it can potentially be more helpful for us in finding other funding. So we do have a business and sustainability committee that I've been chairing, and I really just sort of flipped it around recently at our annual membership meeting. I thought it's really, the committee is really about sustaining our business. So it's now the SOB committee rather than the BS committee. But it is about ways to really be creative about what we're doing here, why we're doing it, and how it can get funded. So marketing is a big piece of it, of course, and collaborations. And any ideas that you all have on the phone, please share with us, because that's part of the beauty of working in coalitions, is really not having to recreate the wheel, but being able to share others' ideas.
Great. So Ellie, do you want to give us a quick rundown on training? And then actually for everybody else, we'll have a Q&A. We may go over a little bit over the hour in order to try to get as much in as we can. But right after Ellie's session.
Okay. So I'm talking about training, and within that, I think it's important to remember that training is, a foundation for any organization, right, to stay abreast of what's going on and to make sure that the service providers have the up-to-the-moment information and are providing the best service possible. So this is one of the important aspects of HomeSmart New York, because, as mentioned earlier, there are 7 chapters. We're a very large state, and so it would be difficult to offer one training for the whole state. So the chapters are really useful in that trainings are offered at the chapter quarterly meetings at areas throughout the state. And that can address a couple of different things, right? It can address any statewide information that needs to be imparted to housing counseling agencies. It can also address any local information that is specific to the region that those counseling agencies are serving. And it can also address national trends and changes and issues that are going on. We often at the chapter meetings talk about the things that are going on at the national level with HUD funding, with FHA mortgages, with HAMP, and so on. So it's great that we have these chapters where people can get really regular training. It's also helpful to be able to coordinate place-based trainings on, various topics. The chapters have had NeighborWorks webinars at some of the chapter meetings. And then this is really to make sure that the New York State housing counselors are doing the best that they can, because as mentioned a number of different times, is the importance of of quality and trust for other partners outside of housing counseling to work with the housing counseling organizations and to refer homeowners and to provide funding and to be seen for HomeSmart New York to be seen as the go-to when these kinds of services are needed. And the value of the collaboration among all of the groups in the state also allows for an economy of scale. So you have really highly trained, educated, knowledgeable professionals who can gather together and advocate and market and fundraise and also provide services to homeowners. So that's training, one of the important aspects of the coalition.
Great. And I think just, so we're going to go to Q&A in just a second, so feel free to, if you've got some thoughts, put them in the question box right now. It does really jump out at me that in some ways, while there's a lot of activity that the HomeSmart New York and this collaborative has done, part of it is not done by housing counseling agencies. So part of it has been by other partners who they've brought in. And so in your state, legal services, there may be programs, there may be state housing finance agency, there may be think tanks, that resource groups that may be interested in being part of the team and part of the partners, all this. And at some time we may want to think about all these sort of governance issues and how does housing counseling stay on the front line of this and still get valuable input and participation by other players. I think the idea of bringing in resources that aren't just our own is really valuable. Well, that was terrific. Thank you so much. Matthew, what kind of questions have we got in the queue?
Yeah, so I think this is probably one that's on a lot of people's minds, but someone asked if you could just talk about kind of initial growing pains and, kind of working through those initial things and kind of getting the infrastructure set up, and, especially given that it was on an entirely volunteer basis at first. Maybe just any advice that you could share with people on working through those initial early stages.
It's hell.
All right.
No, just kidding. I mean, I think this is Hillary. I think what's important, and I can't really understate the role of a supporter we had in NABWorks America's Northeast region office at the time, but it really does take a commitment of a handful of people at least that are, willing to put their noses to the grindstone and work this out and stay there for a while to see it through. It's creating organizations and developing their capacity is challenging on a local model, never mind trying to get all us kittens, organized and together. So I do think it's challenging, and it really, I found that finding some people who weren't actually, the toughest part was asking people who are counseling clients, sometimes to be the volunteers, because they had the most limited schedules in some ways. So it was really helpful to have some others, I think, to have that broad and diverse group be able to do it. We did work with a couple of consultants in terms of helping develop our bylaws, people who are familiar particularly with the state laws, because we're a highly regulated state. So that was helpful. And it was it was a consistent kind of thing. It was every month was a call, or committees would, meet in between that monthly call, whatever. So it was a big commitment. That was a challenge. I think that partly what was really helpful was the chapter meetings, even in areas of the state that were fairly competitive, on the ground with each other. I think they really felt like that through this coalition that had no vested interest in getting customers on whatever, is that they really saw the value in it. They got good information. They were able to bring speakers to the chapter meetings and have access to lenders or policymakers or whatever that they wouldn't have had before. They were able to share resources or information, networking, share customers sometimes, when you get over the competition. So I think that was helpful in terms of getting the groups on the ground to see the value and work together, and then that continued to help support the statewide growth of those of us who were sort of doing it at the 80,000-foot level, not on the ground.
I may just add that I think housing counseling can be kind of isolating for people, and just being with your peers is a valuable thing too.
I think we found that in those early days this is Jennifer, that in those early days that bringing the practitioners, the actual housing counselors, into the room together, just giving them time to talk, because this was also the foreclosure crisis began around the same time, just them being able to talk and compare and vent really was extremely helpful. And it was helpful to those of us who are working on a higher level organizationally to see that we had universal problems. The fax shredder became the joke, that we would fax our documents to the bank and it would be shredded on their end. Kind of gave us our gallows humor, but it also alerted us to where we were having difficulties and where we needed to focus.
Great. So Matthew, what else in the queue?
So this is from someone I think who has some insider knowledge. He asked if you could explain the work that you've done with, and I'm going to get this wrong, but is it Sonima or Sunima?
Sunny Mae.
Sonny Mae.
They're the State Housing Finance Agency.
Yeah. So if you could just explain your partnership with them and how that helped you grow as a collaborative.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us could talk about this, but I'll just note that the relationship with HCR goes back to inception.
Could you speak into the phone more? We can't quite hear you.
Sorry. So maybe someone else should talk. I was just going to say that the relationship with HCR and Sunny Mae went way back to the beginning of the coalition, when they were really helpful in providing both leadership and then connecting us to NFMC funding in the early days of the foreclosure crisis, and now a number of HomeSmart New York members are helping them launch a new program funded with settlement funding from Chase to help get new home buyers with special mortgages in post-foreclosure neighborhoods. It's called the Neighborhood Recovery Fund. So it's been a long-time partnership. I think Sunny Mae in particular and HCR as well really has benefited from having access to a network of housing counselors throughout the state. And like I said, there was that initial relationship with an expert on homeownership counseling that Jennifer could probably talk more coherently about than I can, who was there from the beginning.
Well, HCR, just so people know, is our state housing agency, which is not called HCR anymore, but
No, it is called Homes and Community Renewal. Yeah.
Okay,
Homes
but
and
it's
Community
part of it. Isn't it part of a larger entity now? I thought it had
It used to be DHCR. Now it's just
right.
HCR.
Now it's just HCR. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is our housing agency, and I was in New Jersey while all this stuff was going on. Yeah, it was actually HCR that brought me in as a banker. I was at Bank of New York at the time, and it was Anna Old from HCR who contacted me and asked me to come to a meeting to talk about forming the coalition.
So I would also say that our housing finance agency, Sunny Mae, has had an advisory group for years, and some of the members of that are just, some of them are housing counselors, and some are friends of housing counselors, and some are lenders that understand the value of housing counseling, and some are consultants that really understand the value of housing counseling. So they had also this sort of inside group, I guess, this advisement group that was really promoting, bringing housing counseling to scale, ensuring the consistent quality of professional counseling, across the state. So that was an important partner of ours. Those people who were on the advisory committee was really key. And Homes and Community Renewal, the state housing agency, of which Sunny Mae, of which our HFA is a part of, they actually got the first foreclosure money from state before the Attorney General's office got it. And so they have experience with running, with funding not-for-profit agencies. They had experience developing the first foreclosure prevention housing counseling program in the state, and really looked to HomeSmart New York and Empire Justice to help them develop the program. So the relationships, I think, even outside of the money, I mean, you need to build the relationships and have the partners that understand the importance of counseling and what it means for communities. It's not just consumers. It's the larger issue that, as Christy said, the post-foreclosure communities as well. So I think is a good way to get the housing finance agencies involved.
And how do you handle this question of who the governance is? I mean, is it just housing counseling agencies, or do you have partners in as well? How do you manage that?
This is Hillary. I'll speak to that because I worked with a local consultant guy here in the Albany area on developing the bylaws, which I wouldn't wish upon. But so we developed the organization. We're very important that housing counselors and housing counseling agencies are the driving force behind it. So we didn't at all want to dilute our voice while bringing in other partners. So we created this different level of memberships. So I think the first one is, again, housing counseling agencies and individual housing counselors, understanding that they go from, as they change jobs, they might want to continue to remain an individual member of us. So that group of members have voting rights. And then we had other sort of member partners, and that were folks that could support the mission, participate in meetings, and not necessarily have a vote on whatever the official business was. And it's always it's always in flux. If that we can bylaws can be changed. The thing about bylaws is you don't want to get too restrictive in it, particularly when you're first starting up, because you do want to create the flexibility and not have to go back and change them all the time. So one of the things that we found that was important in our bylaws is to say refer to attachment A, our policy on membership. So that way we can change the membership policy and not the bylaws, because it refers to the policy. So that was useful to us as well.
Well, that's a good idea.
Also, I just want to very quickly, this is Ellie, I just very quickly want to say, and also the board is comprised of representatives from the different chapters, but then there's also a number of seats that are for at-large delegates, and those seats are meant to be available to, to people who are partners and supporters who could be on the board to help advise. So it's another way to kind of, the counseling agencies really lead really captain the ship, but the crew is comprised of other people who are partners and supporters.
Right, and most committees are open to to all partners, so housing counseling agencies and others, and that's been really important because there's only so much volunteer work you can get out of people who are already busy. And we do have, I think, 6 committees or something that are really active.
One of the things we have seen in the NHRC work is that as we kind of fill in the informational things, it becomes clearer and clearer that the value of the work of housing counseling groups in the policy discussions. And I think this is a really valuable mechanism they want to make sure happens locally, that we have power in the sense of a variety of things, but one of them is informational. And the capacity of these groups to be successful has a lot to do with how well we communicate all that, and this is a vehicle for doing that stuff, very important. Well, I think this has been a terrific discussion. I think it's the beginning of important things, but I think this has been very helpful. Matthew, do you have a thing you want to add?
Yes, And I'll just mention we're just past 5, and I think we're just about done with questions, but we're going to go a little bit over. So the last question we have, so I think it had come up, the idea of HomeSmart New York partnering with other kind of regionals, whether statewide or regional collaboratives. If anyone could just talk a little bit about what you think is, the most valuable things that could come out of kind of collaborations within these regional collaboratives.
So I'm going to jump right in on that because another collaborative that got mentioned that is pretty powerful and useful and does a lot of work in New York State is New Yorkers for Responsible Lending. And many of the HomeSmart New York organizations are also members of New Yorkers for Responsible Lending. And I'll tell you, New Yorkers for Responsible Lending has been around for a little bit longer than HomeSmart New York, but it's been typically very lawyer heavy, and it is it's a policy advocacy type group that really pushes forward a lot of different legislation in New York State and was instrumental in getting the settlement conference process that we have in New York State and then improving the settlement conference process. And what happens with that coalition is whoever is on the calls when things are being discussed, because again, we're such a huge state, all organizing happens by call, except for one annual meeting where we set the platform for the year and the policy priorities for the year. But if you're on the calls, oh, I'm starting to echo. Oh, I didn't echo that. Okay. If you're on the calls, then your voice is heard and what your topic is gets mentioned. And so a very concrete example recently was some legislation that New Yorkers for Responsible Lending was really working on and pushing on the calls and trying to organize what was going to be said and how it was going to be designed. A HomeSmart New York member was on the calls and, as a housing counseling agency, put into that legislation something very specific for housing counseling. And were she not on that call, that wouldn't have happened. So that's only one example, but it's just something very concrete in my mind. And so that's the value of those two coalitions working together, right? That New Yorkers for Responsible Lending talks about consumer finance, and housing counselors work with people who are trying to get access to credit. And so together they can inform each other.
And if I can add, as far as collaborating, that's collaborating all within New York, but we also need to collaborate on outside of on things that are going to affect us from the federal level. And obviously for that we collaborate with NHRC, and Ellie and I are both on the advisory board of NHRC and involved with NHRC. So I see a lot of value in collaborating with people outside of New York, and in replicating other things and bringing them into New York. I mean, we certainly, we could certainly use input and learn from others, and I would welcome collaboration with others. And if people have collaboratives or thinking of starting collaboratives, I would love to start some type of a conversation where we are able to share information too.
So I think the goal here is this is the beginning of a conversation about how we support more of this on a local level. And, to be frank, NHRC would love to support groups doing it. We're a staff of 2 people, and, we're not going to do it. It's got to happen locally. The things we can do to help, we can help pull together lists of counseling agencies in your area. We'll try to think about resources. We will have an ongoing conversation. But it's going to happen locally, and it's going to have local leadership, and it'll take a form, whatever form you choose to design in your locality. We're trying to think of what can we do to make this easier and more helpful for you going forward, and realizing that you may be in a state or locality where there's nothing, or where there's something but it needs to grow, or there's something that's very robust and full-fledged. And we're interested in supporting all of those things and figuring out how to make them grow. And also, as we do with HomeSmart New York, we would love to feed national issues to your program as well, so that we're all kind of working on the same path. So it would be very helpful to us right now if you have ideas about what would be useful. Shoot us an email. Let's get that thinking going. We'll mention this call on the leaders call on Thursday. Most of the call will be devoted to the problems we're having with RESPA and housing counseling funding. It's a really big issue, very big for our future, but we'll at least mention it. And what would be best is if you got some thoughts, put them in a bullet point or whatever your best format is, and shoot them to me. I'm sort of very eager to figure this out, but I don't have a great concept. I think this is path we have to plow ourselves, and there's not a clear path. HUD, I know, is very supportive around this. I think other institutions are supportive as well, and I think this is an opportunity for all of us. Thank you very much to the panel. Jennifer, Hillary, Lucy, Christy, Ellie, thank you. That was very, very helpful. And we'll work on, figuring out some schedule of events that we can do more calls in the future. All right. Thanks, everybody, for your participation. This was a great turnout.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.